This is a story about a document that should not exist. It begins not with a cataclysm, but with a whisper from a box covered in the dust of decades, found in an attic in Virginia Beach. Inside, wrapped in cloth, a folder and an envelope with a chillingly specific instruction, to be opened only after 70 years. The contents are now the subject of a silent war on the internet. A leaked transcript that vanishes and reappears, a digital ghost hunted by skeptics and hidden by seekers. Some call it a masterful forgery, but those who have studied the thousands of pages of Edgar Cayce's work, who know his voice, his cadence, his unnerving calm in the face of the infinite, they insist. This is the Lost Interview, a conversation recorded in 1944, just months before his death, a final transmission not meant for public ears, detailing the 7 levels every soul must navigate after leaving the physical world. The transcript begins with a sentence so direct, it shatters our most fundamental assumptions. Everything you have been taught about death, it reads, is a protective facade. The real journey begins after the final heartbeat, and humanity is not ready. This document doesn't just challenge the idea that the brain creates consciousness. It presents a detailed map of what lies beyond the veil. To understand the weight of this map, you must first understand the cartographer. Edgar Cayce was not a guru on a mountaintop. He was a Sunday school teacher from Kentucky, a photographer, a man of simple faith and profound doubt. He never claimed to be a prophet. In fact, the strange abilities that haunted him for his entire life were a source of great personal conflict. Cayce's process was as mundane as it was miraculous. He would lie down on a couch, loosen his tie, and enter a self-induced trance. In this state, with his conscious mind completely absent, a different voice would emerge. A voice that could diagnose illnesses in patients hundreds of miles away with stunning accuracy. A voice that could speak of ancient history as if reading from a lost library. For over 40 years, this process was documented meticulously. Stenographers recorded over 14,000 of these readings, creating a body of work that remains one of the largest and most perplexing collections of psychic information ever compiled. He wasn't a mystic selling enlightenment. He was a reluctant oracle, a medical diagnostician who operated beyond the known senses, and whose work was so consistently effective that people, including doctors and skeptics, came to him as a last resort. This is the man who drew the map, a man who claimed to journey through the realms of consciousness, not as a believer, but as a traveler. This ability was a profound burden. Cayce was a devout Christian who initially feared his powers were the work of a demonic force. He couldn't understand how a simple man like him could access such knowledge. It was only when he realized the information was consistently used for healing and helping others that he reluctantly accepted his strange role in the world. He claimed his sleeping mind was not creating but accessing, tapping into a cosmic library, a universal database of every thought, word, and deed, past, present, and future. A concept ancient traditions called the Akashic Records. He was not the author of these revelations. He saw himself as a humble librarian for the universe's book of life. He was simply reading what was already written. This is what makes his testimony so compelling. The information did not come from his beliefs, his ego, or his desires. It came from a source he claimed was available to all of humanity, a source he accessed in the silent space between heartbeats. And in his final draining months, this reluctant librarian was compelled to read aloud from its most sacred and forbidden volume, the chapter on death itself. According to the transcript, Cayce describes the first stages not as a judgment, but as a universal, immutable process of consciousness shedding its physical identity, a journey home. The first level is called the transitional state. Here, the soul awakens in a state of profound confusion, like a dreamer trying to surface from a deep sleep. It doesn't yet comprehend its own death. It searches for familiar ground, but sees only echoes of its earthly attachments and fears. Cayce warns that souls can linger here for what we perceive as decades, trapped in a loop of their own unresolved life. The second level is the Great Reflection. The soul is guided to relive its life, but with a critical shift in perspective. It experiences every moment not from its own point of view, but from the point of view of every person it ever affected. You feel the pain you inflicted directly. You feel the joy you brought to others as your own. It is not a punishment, Cayce explains, but a perfect mechanism of empathy, the first true lesson in the interconnectedness of all life. The third level is the awareness. Here, the soul begins to grasp the fundamental laws of reality. It encounters guides, what Cayce and countless others describe as beings of light. They communicate not in words, but in pure understanding, transmitting knowledge through resonance. This is the stage of profound enlightenment, where the soul finally understands its place in the cosmic order. But this map, as described by Cayce, is not an anomaly. It is a stunning point of convergence. The 18th century scientist and mystic Emanuel Swedenborg, in his detailed chronicles of the spiritual world, described a near-identical progression. Centuries earlier, the Bardo Thodol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, offered a precise manual for the consciousness navigating the intermediate states, or bardos, that bear a striking resemblance to Cayce's levels. 3 different explorers, from 3 different eras, drawing 3 different maps of the exact same unseen territory. And according to all of them, these first 3 levels are merely the entryway. The real journey, the part that challenges the very nature of our identity, begins after this. It begins in the forbidden levels. Let's delve deeper into this cartography. Imagine the first level, the transitional state, not as a place but as a form of spiritual vertigo. The soul is still vibrating at the frequency of its physical life, a phantom limb still aching for a world it can no longer touch. It's an echo chamber of earthly habits, of worries about unpaid bills and cherished memories of a loved one's smile. This is the great weaning, the slow and sometimes painful process of letting go of the identity of a lifetime. The great reflection is the universe's most profound classroom. It is the law of karma made viscerally real. It is not a film you watch. It is a full-body immersion into the ripple effect of your own existence. You are not shown the consequences of your actions. You become them. You feel the stab of your unkind words in your own heart. You feel the warmth of your compassion enveloping you from another's soul. There is no judge, no jury, only perfect, unyielding consequence. It is here the soul learns the first great truth. There is no other. There is only one shared consciousness, and every wound inflicted was a wound upon the self. Then comes the awareness, a homecoming to clarity. The beings of light, Cayce suggests, are not foreign entities. They are aspects of a greater unified consciousness, perhaps even future versions of ourselves, who communicate in the native language of the soul, pure knowing. The knowledge they impart isn't learned, it is remembered. It is the moment the soul is reminded of the rules of the game it chose to play, the purpose of the incarnation it just completed. It is a deep, cosmic sigh of, now I understand. This is the core of the investigation. Swedenborg called this realm the world of spirits, a middle state of unpacking and realization. The Bardo Thodol describes it as a confrontation with the peaceful deities, which are nothing more than radiant projections of one's own enlightened mind. The language differs, the cultural symbols change, but the process is identical, a shedding of the false self, a confrontation with the truth of one's actions, and an awakening to a larger reality. If one explorer returns with a map, it is a story. If multiple explorers, separated by centuries and continents, return with the same map, it becomes evidence. But here, the transcript reveals its true, terrifying purpose. This map is not just for the dead. It is for us, the living. Cayce asserts that humanity, as a single global soul, is also progressing through these levels of consciousness. And right now, in the 21st century, we are collectively at the threshold of the 3rd level, the stage of awareness. We are a species on the verge of a planetary awakening, or a catastrophic self-denial. It was from this vantage point that Cayce claimed to see the future, not as a fixed timeline but as an ocean of probabilities, filled with dense, powerful knots of near-inevitable events. The transcript speaks of one such knot in the middle of our century, a great rupture. He described images that are chillingly familiar to the modern eye. Cities without light, a world gripped by a silent, invisible fear, and most profoundly, the birth of a new generation of children with clear memories of their past lives. If what Cayce, Swedenborg, and the ancient texts described is true, then the implications are staggering. It means we are not our bodies. We are immortal consciousness having a temporary human experience. This single idea changes everything we thought we knew about loss, purpose, and what it means to be alive. It reframes our entire existence from a brief race towards oblivion into a single chapter in an infinite journey of learning. But it is precisely at the 4th level that the map takes a turn into the truly unknown. Here the warnings begin. Here lies a truth not about empathy, but about identity itself, a truth so profound it can shatter the unprepared soul. Think of our current global crisis not as a series of political or environmental problems, but as the labor pains of this collective birth into the third level, the rampant division, the explosion of information and misinformation, the desperate search for meaning in a world that seems to have lost its soul. These are the symptoms of a species grappling with its own reflection. We are, as a whole, experiencing the planetary version of the Great Reflection, forced to feel the consequences of our collective actions. The prophecy of children born with memories of past lives is not just a mystical detail, it is the linchpin of this transformation. Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia, spent 40 years investigating over 2,500 such cases, finding stunning and often inexplicable correlations between a child's memories and the life of a deceased person. What if this is not an anomaly, but a preview? What if the veil of forgetting which separates one life from the next is beginning to thin? Such a generation would be ungovernable by the old paradigms of fear and division. How do you threaten a person with death when they know it is merely a transition? How do you sell them a fleeting identity when they remember being someone else? This is not just a spiritual evolution, it is a revolution of consciousness. This turns Cayce's prophecy from a distant warning into an immediate existential question. Are we participating in this awakening? Or are we clinging to the illusions of the first level, living like sleepwalkers in a world that is desperately trying to wake us up? The answer determines not just our personal journey after death, but our collective future. The stakes are no longer personal, they are planetary, and the next level of the map reveals the psychological mechanism that could either liberate us or break us completely. Cayce called the fourth level the corridor of mirrors. Here, he said, the soul is confronted with a reality far more unsettling than its past actions. It is forced to witness, in perfect clarity, all the lives it could have lived. This is not a metaphor. Imagine a hallway of infinite doors, and behind each door is a version of you that made a different choice at a critical moment. The you that forgave instead of seeking revenge. The you that pursued a hidden passion instead of a safe career. The you that fell into a dark addiction. The terrifying revelation in this corridor is that all of these selves are real. They exist as vibrant, energetic potentials within the cosmic field. Every choice we make doesn't just create a future, it prunes an infinite garden of possibilities. Here, the soul understands that it is not a singular entity, but a vast, multi-dimensional consciousness, and the life it just lived was only one of its countless expressions. The fifth level is infinite time. The illusion of linear progression, past, present, future, collapses. The soul perceives all moments as one simultaneous, accessible now. This is the realm from which prophecies are born, not as seeing the future, but as reading the energetic density of the present moment. The sixth level is the separation of the shadow. The soul finally releases all that is not its core essence. Pain, fear, pride, envy. They are not destroyed but understood and integrated, like a student graduating from a difficult lesson. It is a purification by light, an unburdening that allows the soul, for the first time, to directly perceive the creative source. And then comes the seventh level. Here the transcript simply breaks. A long, silent pause is noted, and then a single, haunting sentence. I cannot speak of it. I am not allowed. Who forbade it? What could be so profound, so overwhelming, that it is beyond the capacity of human language? This is the absolute limit of the map, a boundary drawn not by a divine censor, but perhaps by the very structure of our minds. It suggests that the final truth of existence is not a piece of knowledge to be learned, but a state of being to be experienced. A state so alien to our concept of self that to describe it would be to contain an ocean in a teacup. Let's dissect the philosophical terror of the corridor of mirrors. This is the ultimate confrontation with the self, not as a singular character in a story, but as an entire cast of actors. The realization that the you that lived and died is no more real or valid than the you that made a different choice is a profound assault on the ego. It dismantles the very idea of a fixed identity. If all your potential selves are equally real on a spiritual level, then who are you? You are the chooser, the consciousness that navigated the labyrinth, and for the first time, you are forced to take responsibility, not just for what you did, but for what you failed to become. This stage echoes the deepest insights of quantum physics, where reality is not a single solid line, but a shimmering cloud of probabilities until the moment of observation. The fifth level, infinite time, is where the soul graduates from student to scholar. If the corridor of mirrors was about personal history, this level is about cosmic history. It is Plato's world of forms made manifest, where the archetypal patterns behind events are seen with perfect clarity. A soul at this level could trace the entire karmic lineage of a war, from its first seed of hatred in a single mind to its final bloody conclusion centuries later. This is not memory. It is direct perception of the causal web that binds all existence. The soul doesn't just see the future, it understands the architecture of destiny. The silence surrounding the seventh level is itself the most powerful clue. Mystics from every tradition, from Plotinus describing his union with the One to the Zen masters speaking of Satori, all arrive at this same wall of silence. They report a reality so unified and transcendent that the subject-object relationship, the very foundation of language, dissolves. There is no I to describe the it. There is only the experience. To speak of it is to immediately create a duality that does not exist there. Cayce's inability to speak wasn't a refusal, it was a report that he had reached the boundary where the map ends and the territory of pure, ineffable being begins. But if these maps exist, if this knowledge has been independently verified by explorers of consciousness across centuries, why is it not the most urgent topic of human investigation? Because it stands in direct opposition to the dominant paradigm of our time, scientific materialism. The belief that consciousness is nothing more than an accidental byproduct of brain chemistry, that when the brain dies, the lights go out. End of story. From this worldview, any evidence to the contrary is not a discovery but a malfunction. Experiences like these are dismissed, pathologized. They are explained away as a lack of oxygen to the temporal lobe, a flood of endorphins, a predictable neurological storm in a dying brain. These explanations are the tools of a paradigm trying to protect its own boundaries. They are attempts to shrink the infinite back into a physical box it can measure. But they have always failed to explain one critical recurring fact: the phenomenon of veridical perception. How does a patient with a flatlined EEG and no measurable brain activity accurately describe the specific surgical tools being used on their own body? How do they recount conversations happening in the waiting room, down the hall? How does a consciousness, declared clinically non-existent, see with perfect clarity? The materialist paradigm has no answer for this. It has no answer for the haunting consistency of the maps drawn by Cayce, Swedenborg, and the Tibetan masters, and so it ignores the data. It labels the witnesses as unreliable and the experiences as anecdotes. Because this knowledge is not just an anomaly, it is a revolution. It suggests that the entire foundation of our modern world, the fear of death, the pursuit of fleeting material gain, the belief that we are nothing more than biological machines, is built on a false premise. To accept this evidence is to accept that we are infinitely more powerful and responsible than we have been told. And that is a truth a system built on control cannot afford to embrace. Let's be clear about the nature of this resistance. It is not necessarily a conscious conspiracy, but a deep, systemic, and often unconscious defense mechanism. Modern science is a powerful tool, but it operates under a self-imposed limitation. It can only study that which is observable and repeatable within a closed physical system. The territory described by these maps lies, by definition, outside that system. Science, in this context, is not a seeker of all truth, but a guardian of a specific method. The problem arises when the guardian mistakes the limits of its tools for the limits of reality. It's like a man with only a metal detector, insisting that diamonds do not exist, because his instrument cannot find them. The researchers who have dared to investigate these phenomena, pioneers like Dr. Raymond Moody, who first coined the term near-death experience, or Dr. Bruce Grayson, whose decades of rigorous study have brought the topic to the brink of academic acceptance, are often treated as heretics. Their work reveals the fatal flaw in the materialist argument. If NDEs are merely hallucinations, they should be chaotic, random, and unique to the individual's cultural conditioning. Instead, they exhibit a stunningly consistent core structure across cultures, ages, and belief systems. The tunnel, the being of light, the life review, the encounter with deceased relatives. This is not the signature of a hallucination, it is the signature of a journey. The ridicule is a psychological defense. If this knowledge is true, it means that the purpose of life is not accumulation, but evolution of the soul. It means that our actions have eternal consequences. This is a terrifying ethical demand. It is far more comforting to believe that death is an off switch, that our mistakes will be erased, and that there is no ultimate accountability. The materialist paradigm is not just a scientific model, it is a psychological sanctuary for those who are not yet ready to face the full implication of their own immortality. And so, we are left standing at the edge of this vast, hidden continent. This lost interview, whether a literal transcript or a profound allegory, is not just a story, it is an invitation. It offers a framework to reinterpret our own deepest experiences. The strange moments of intuition, the profound sense of connection with another person, the inexplicable feeling that we have lived before and will live again. These are not glitches in our mental software. They are postcards from our deeper self, faint signals from the levels of consciousness that exist within us right now. The map suggests we are not meant to wait for death to begin this journey. The first level is the sleepwalking of our daily routines. The second is the practice of radical empathy. The third is the courage to seek a deeper truth, to connect the dots. Now that you have been exposed to this map, you cannot unsee it. The knowledge has been transmitted. The choice, as Cayce's final haunting note warned, is now yours. If this investigation expanded your sense of what is possible, leave a like, not for the algorithm, but as a sign that your mind is open. Subscribe if you are ready to investigate the next piece of this cosmic puzzle. The great exploration has only just begun.